Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and today I'm sharing a fun little project that combines a little bit of scrap wood and a little bit of plexiglass. It would make a great display case for a trophy or a keepsake, but I actually made it to be used as a cake or pie carrier. I'm not much of a chef, so when I bring food to family get-togethers, I prefer to wow them with my projects rather than my cooking. But whatever you choose to use this for, it's a really fun project that only requires a few tools. Before we get building, I wanted to give a huge thanks to our video sponsor, Build Something. I provided the link to the free plans on their website for this project in the description below, along with a link to all of the tools used in this video. So if you're ready to get building, let's go. A few videos ago, you may remember that I built myself a new desk, and I had to remove the old desk in order to put in the new one that I just built, and I brought those scrap pieces out to the shop just to be able to reuse them eventually. Turns out I didn't have to wait too long to find the perfect use for some of those scraps because I used the 3/4 inch plywood top from my old desk to cut all of the pieces for this project. I've detailed all the dimensions in the plans linked below, but I first trimmed this top down to a 12-inch strip using my circular saw and my Kreg rip cut. By the way, if you're interested in how I cut down my plywood, I'll link a helpful video for that below. Once I had my 12-inch strip, I used my Kreg AccuCut to make the rest of the cuts. I cut a bottom, a back, and two sides large enough to fit a pie dish into and tall enough to be able to fit a cake to later if I wanted. Obviously, if you're using this for a display case, you can easily modify the size here to fit whatever you're wanting to display. I dry fit all of my pieces together and made a mark along the edges that I wanted the plexiglass to go so that I could cut some dado grooves for the plexiglass to slide into. I also labeled each piece just to make sure I knew which was which. I wanted to cut the dado grooves about a 1/2 inch in from each edge, and I wanted them to be slightly deeper than a 1/4 inch and slightly wider than an 1/8 of an inch. So the first thing I did was use my Kreg multi-mark tool set to a 1/2 inch to make a mark along the edges that I needed to cut. Then I lined my AccuCut along this line on one of the pieces and adjusted my circular saw depth so that it barely cut into the wood. I gradually dropped the depth and repeated the cut until it was just a little deeper than a 1/4 of an inch. I used my multi-mark tool again set to a 1/4 of an inch to be able to check this depth. After I had my blade depth set right, I adjusted my AccuCut over just to the edge of the first cut line and cut again. This would basically just give me a dado thickness of about 2 blade widths, which is a little over an 1/8 of an inch. Since I was using an 1/8 of an inch plexiglass for this, I just needed these dado grooves to be slightly wider so it could easily slide in and out of place. Once I had my first dado cut, I repeated this on all of the lines that I have drawn where I needed the dados. Then I dry fit everything together to make sure that it all lined up properly. The last thing that I needed to cut were the quote-unquote handles that will hold the plexiglass pieces. Because these pieces are pretty small, I used a larger piece of scrap plywood, made my dado cuts, and then cut the handles off of that piece. So I made a mark on each side a 1/2 inch in from the edge, just like I did on the previous pieces. I cut dados on these lines just like before as well. Once I had my dados cut, then I dropped my blade depth to cut all the way through the plywood this time, and I cut 3/4 inch in from the edge to give me a 3/4 inch square dowel with a dado. Once both were cut, I trimmed them to length to fit at the top corner of the box. In the meantime, I called up my local glass place to cut me 2 pieces for the top and the front for this box. I just placed the handles where they needed to go and then measured both openings and added a 1/2 inch to each side so they would slide into the 1/4 inch dados. Again, all of the dimensions are listed in the plans below. Also, if you don't have or know of a local glass shop, you can usually just buy sheets from your local big box store and cut them yourself, or sometimes they'll cut them for you as well. I test fit the pieces to make sure everything would work before gluing it together, and then applied some edge banding to all the exposed plywood edges just for a cleaner look. Because the bottom of the box will be holding all of the weight and they'll be hidden, I chose to use pocket holes on the bottom side. But you would probably be fine with just glue and nails if you didn't want to use pocket holes. I assembled the bottom between the sides using wood glue and pocket hole screws, and then I used wood glue and nails to secure the back panel. While the glue dried on those, I used some clear Gorilla Glue in the dados on the handles and very carefully pre-drilled holes for some small 5/8 inch wood screws. I tried to drill as close to the edge as I could so that the screw would still hold, but honestly, I think that the clear Gorilla Glue would have held it just fine once it was dry. A couple added screws don't hurt, but those are optional. I think if I was going to do it over, I would just skip the screws altogether and just use the glue. Anyway, once everything was dry, I gave the wood components a couple coats of clear poly and headed inside to make a pie to stage this with. Cooking and food are not really an interest of mine, so let's fast forward this section of footage and get to the good part. Once the pie is done, just place it inside the box and carry it to the party. It's definitely not your typical pie or cake carrier, but I really don't prefer the typical stuff, so I'm okay with that. This project was really fun to make, and I'm honestly excited to use it for the upcoming holidays. I hope you've enjoyed this project too, and if you'd like to build your own, be sure to check out the free plans linked below. And if you want my super easy apple pie recipe, I'll share that below as well. If you want more creative and unexpected do-it-yourself projects, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on what's coming next. Thanks so much for watching, you guys, and until next time, happy building!